Okay, in this chapter we're going to talk about heat-related emergencies. And normal body temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're following along, this is chapter 21, just in case you need more information than what I have here. So, heat cramps. The first thing we're going to talk about. And so these are just simply muscle spasms. And usually this is going to be like the calf muscle, the hamstring, probably the most common areas, sometimes the abdominals. So if you don't know where this is on the leg, let me kind of draw this out for you. Here's our kneecap. There's our leg here. I know I'm not the best artist, but here's your calf muscle. Here's your hamstring. You also have the quadricep on the front part of the thigh, which makes up 4 muscle groups make up the quadricep. That's why we call it a quadricep. And you have the tibialis anterior over here on the side of the shin bone. So the shin bone being exposed, and it's kind of over on the side. Anyway, so normally your cramps are going to happen right here at the hamstring or the biceps femoris. It's got, you may hear it called either way. And you have the calf muscle, which is also called the gastrocnemius. So anyway, that's where a lot of heat cramps happen. And some experts think it's from drinking too much water and not replacing electrolytes. And in your book, they say, well, some experts argue that we have so much salt in our diet, it doesn't really matter if we drink a lot of water. We've got so much salt in our diet, we should have enough electrolytes. But they could be leaving out the other electrolytes like potassium and chloride. And so a lot of times when you drink sports drinks, most of those replace sodium, potassium, and chloride being the 3 main electrolytes. So I kind of agree with other experts. It could be due to dehydration. I mean, but I can see how drinking too much water could cause an electrolyte imbalance. It's not saying we don't have enough sodium. We're talking about an imbalance. So potassium and chloride, we may not have enough. So to care for this, and these are common themes when we even get to heat exhaustion, we want to remove them to a cool place if we can. Let's get them out of the heat source. We can drink a sports drink. You may want to dilute it a little bit because some of them are pretty sweet. You could give them some Pedialyte or something like that. That's pretty good. If you didn't have a sports drink, you could mix a quarter teaspoon salt with some water with 1 quart water. That would work. And we can have them stretch and place some ice bags on the area. Let's talk about heat exhaustion. I'm going to move through these pretty quick here. Heat exhaustion, pretty common. I see it a lot in a lot of my activity classes, especially during the summer. Or at the beginning of fall semester down in South Texas, it's still real hot and students aren't ready to exercise sometimes. And heat exhaustion is pretty common. That and heat cramps. So you've got heavy sweating. The body's trying to cool itself down by causing that sweat to evaporate and cool the body. Sometimes normal to above normal temperature. A lot of times this happens due to exercise. Electrolyte loss because of all the sweating. Or losses. And then severe dehydration. So dehydration. And that makes the blood more viscous and thick and hard for the body to pump it around. So your symptoms are thirst, fatigue, headache, nausea. There's a whole range of, even in some cases, diarrhea and vomiting, and that causes even more fluid loss. I don't know if y'all ever like to watch the survival shows on TV, but Man, Woman, Wild, that's a good show. It's where they go out and survive. There was one episode where the lady that's his wife that's with him on the show, she has heat exhaustion, almost to the point of heat stroke. She starts getting delirious. Actually, I think it was really more heat stroke. They had to remove them from that area. She was vomiting, fatigued, but she was like that for several days and eventually started to kind of get out of it. And that's really where you start getting into heat stroke. And I think she was still sweating, though, but it wasn't exertional. So it was more like the classic signs of heat stroke. So, and this eventually will evolve into heat stroke, which is extremely dangerous. And that's exactly what was happening to her. She had all these different classic symptoms, especially dehydration. She was really dehydrated because they didn't have a lot to eat or a lot to drink out there. So that's a good show to watch. I like that because you get to see some crazy stuff. So let's talk about heat stroke. I'm going to make this fast so I don't run out of time. And you have classic and exertional. So your classic would be like when you have a heat wave, when you hear about heat waves hitting like the north and they're not accustomed to it. It's like the slow cooker effect. People start to get dehydrated because they're just not accustomed to it, so they have this heat wave. It's over several days it takes to develop. You've got a combination of hot environment and dehydration. So it's the combination of that and temperature. So your temperature and humidity play a big role. I don't know if y'all have ever been to a city where it's really humid. Sometimes in San Antonio it gets really humid, and along with the temperature, it makes it miserable. It can be only a 90-degree day, which is what we're used to, but if the humidity is high, it really makes it unbearable. I know Houston's like that, it's so close to the coast, really humid, and that can cause some problems. Then you have exertional. So you see this with athletes and people that work outside doing labor and military, all that good stuff. And this is considered the fast cooker. So it happens really fast. And 50% of these people are usually sweating. Normally with heat stroke, they've stopped sweating. These people are still sweating because it happens so fast. Coma can occur with either one of these, and signs that somebody's experiencing some sort of heat stroke, or they have dry skin. Clothing may be wet from sweating, but eventually sweating shuts down, and they may have an altered mental state. Maybe vomiting, nausea, all that good stuff that you see with heat exhaustion. But here's your big warning signs: dry skin, altered mental state, maybe problems with balance, all that good stuff. One last thing I wanted to say here is this one has a 50% death rate. Classic heat stroke. Mainly due to all the dehydration. It's just harder for those people to come back around from it. So, how are you going to care for somebody? You want to loosen clothing or remove as much as you can. Keep their head elevated. Of course, you want to remove them to a different environment. That should be your first step. Get them to a cool environment, or all your other steps maybe for nothing. You want to call 911, definitely, but you've got to remove them first. Unless somebody's with you, you can tell them to call while you're removing them. And you want to cool any way you can. So if you're out in a place where you can't dip them into some sort of bath or something like that, you place wet towels around the major arteries. So up around the neck, under the armpits, in between the legs. Just try to cool them down as fast as you can. You got to be careful sometimes cooling. Like if you threw them in an ice bath, I know your book talks about that, but sometimes that can put people into arrhythmia. Warming people up too fast and cooling somebody down too fast, either way, that change in temperature sometimes can put individuals into an arrhythmia. And I know your book talks about putting them in an ice bath, but you've got to be really careful. I mean, that would be an extreme circumstance. I know they're undergoing heat stroke, but still, you just got to be careful with that. So cool them by any means necessary. So that was a brief highlight. Hopefully I didn't go over on time, and I'll see you in the next video.